So our speaker tonight, as you can see on the screen, is Rachel Mutters, who's Managing Director at Routes to Growth. And she is going to give us all we need to know about how to be more employable. So over to you, Rachel.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. I know you're missing out on the late evening sun, but hopefully it will be worth it. So I've been asked to come and talk to you today about how to be and remain employable. It's a hot topic, it always is, but particularly when we're going through times of change. Quite often people will start to reconsider their direction if there's a big change in life, or if they want to do something better than what they're doing, so looking for a promotion or their next steps in their future. But one thing I wanted to find out from you guys before we start is to just sort of find out who you all are in essence. So if you could use the chat box and just pop in to the chat if you are an apprentice, a student, or somebody who's already working. It'd be great to see who you all are. So just using the chat function, just type in apprentice, student, or already working. Okay, so most of you are working, which is great. Fantastic. Excellent. Okay, so hopefully this sort of top tips will help you if you are looking to change direction or reach for that promotion. So my first sort of tip would be to think about where you're going to start with all of this. So do some decision making. I tend to break this whole presentation down into 3 chunks. There's decision making, then there's planning, and then there's competing. So the first sort of part of this is all going to be around your decision making. So I want you to really reflect on how far you've already come with what you've already been doing, and what skills have you gained, what have you really enjoyed, also what haven't you really enjoyed as well, and things that you might want to avoid moving forward. But have a self-reflection moment. It may be that you need to go back and look at your CV. That might actually need an update. But really think about where you are today and how you've got there. And then obviously we want to think about what we're going to do next. So doing some research around different opportunities. What sort of job titles are out there that are drawing you to go and look at the job description. What sort of things are people talking about on LinkedIn, for example? And then have a discussion, whether it's with friends and family, colleagues. You may have a mentor if you're doing an apprenticeship. It may be that you're talking to your line manager or somebody at college. But have an open discussion with someone that you trust and that you think would be a good person to get some advice on to assist with that initial stage of decision making. So again, with the task, sort of using the chat box function again, I'd really like to know what sort of job title you would like to have on your CV one day. It doesn't necessarily mean you want it now, but what's your aspiration? So I guess in layman's terms, what a lot of parents would say to kids is, what do you want to be when you're older? So what would you enjoy seeing on your CV that would be that sort of proud moment that you've got that job title? Okay, so people put interior designer, manager, director. Okay. Anything more specific beyond the idea of being a manager? Anywhere specific? So MD, yeah, okay. Non-exec director, yeah. Darren's got authorising engineer, HSE advisor. Okay, so there's a nice mix there, but a lot of you are aiming for the more sort of management positions, management and directing. Okay, project engineer, absolutely. Great stuff. Okay. So what I want you to try and figure out now is, what does that mean? What does that job title actually mean? So a number of you have obviously said that you want to be a manager or a managing director, but of what and where? And what does that actually look like? So I'm a managing director of my own business, but I'm also an associate lecturer for a university, and I'm about to be appointed as head of careers and student enterprise at another university. But all these job titles don't really mean anything. It's what's underneath and what I enjoy doing. So think about the roles and responsibilities as a project engineer, as a HSE advisor, as a director. What does that actually mean? What would you be doing? And then think about the industry sector that you want to go into. You might already be in that industry sector now and just wanting to move forward. Or you may be wanting to have a complete about turn and use that skill set. Oh, beg your pardon, I've gone too far forward. There we go. Consider, which direction you want to move into. The skills that you've already gained with any qualifications you have will help you change those directions should you want to, but they'll also help you move on to that next stage. But it's really understanding, what does that job title actually mean? Back in the day when I was at university, quite some time ago, I was obsessed with the idea of being a management consultant because I thought it sounded fancy, until I actually started talking to companies about doing that role and realised it was really finance heavy. I'd have to do loads of exams again. And I thought, actually, no. I mean, it sounds great, but I really don't want to do that, and had to reassess. So get to understand what that actually means. And then think about the employers that fit in those industry sectors and that have those opportunities, whether it's now or in the future. And think about, why do you want to work for them? Is it because they've got particular values that you hold close to your heart? Is it because it's a well-known brand, or they've got a really good reputation? Really think about it, because the first thing they're going to ask you when you do get to an interview is, why do you want to work for us? And why do you want to do this job? So if you've nailed these 3 areas already prior to making an application, it'll be far easier for you to talk about it and understand whether this is the right or wrong direction for you to go in. So the second question I have for you is, how are you going to get there? So again, we've got these wonderful aspirations. You've got your job title in your head. You've understood the industry sectors you want to consider, the employers you want to work for. You know what the job means. So what do you need to do next to get yourself closer to having that job? So really think about if there's any particular courses that you might need to complete. It may be that you need to broaden your networks and have some conversations with people. It could even just be turning up to events like this, where you're open to have open discussions, and you never know who else is on the call with you. But really do start to have a plan about how you hope to achieve your next steps. And one thing I'd highly recommend is using your platforms. So I've put 2 things on here because I know we've got some students on here, as well as some working professionals. But I sit on Instagram all the time in my personal life, but also in my work life. So at the moment, I'm an associate lecturer for the Manchester Fashion Institute, and I'm always scouring different brands and different companies to find out what opportunities they're offering, but also what's coming next in terms of trends and that kind of stuff, and just really being on the ball with my commercial awareness. So it's not necessarily just using your platform to find a job, but it's to understand that sector you're going into. I know a few have mentioned that you're on furlough right now, and hopefully you'll be able to return back to work very soon. But is that because it's the industry sector that's taken a hit, or is it that particular company? And think about, well, where's like a safe bet, so to speak, in terms of a good industry sector that's got a steady state. There might not be a magic button there that says this is the one for me, but it definitely gives you an opportunity to explore. And LinkedIn's a great source. Finding lots of different groups to join, different job boards to look at, all that kind of stuff. So if you're not already on LinkedIn, I would definitely advise that you get onto those platforms and have your own profile, but also that you are using that to your benefit. And of course, Twitter. So this is just one of the screenshots I popped up on there. I can't remember what I typed in now, but I think I just put graduate engineering jobs in, and all these Twitter things came up. So again, you just never know what's going to be there on the platforms you're already using in your day-to-day life, but maybe not in a work respect. And then my 4th tip is to really connect with people, connect with the right people as well. So don't just throw out a LinkedIn connection and hope that someone accepts it. Think about, why do you want to engage with that person, or follow that company, or join that group? When you have got that connection that you want to reach out to, make sure you're putting a valuable request to that person. So some of you may want to link in with me later. If you just press connect, I'm unlikely to accept because I don't know who you are. But if you were to say, I really enjoyed the talk today, it was really helpful, or I want to know more about XYZ, it'd be great to connect, then I can understand where you're coming from and what the purpose is. So think about your personal brand, how you use your voice, how you get yourself across and in front of people, because those first impressions will count. Just today, I put up quite a long piece about a new job that I've now got, and immediately I had somebody just press connect and I deleted it. I could see they were a supplier, and I thought, I know what they're doing here, but as a supplier and working in sales and wanting my business, don't just press connect. It's very lazy. And it's the same when you're looking for jobs. Make a really good first impression. And think about when people do click onto your profile, what that looks like. What does your branding look like for yourself? Because we don't get to meet you first, particularly now because we're all in our own homes. So what are you giving off on those platforms? Even down to the simplest of things of making sure you have a professional email address if you don't obviously want to do anything through your work email address. Just make sure that it's either your full name or it's something really simple so it's not giving off the wrong impression for you. And again, networking is key here, particularly when we are in situations like we found ourselves in the last year, reaching out to people, supporting others, it's like whole good karma thing, being there for others, but will obviously pay back tenfold for yourself and start conversations. So I'm sure there'll be lots of people going through the same as you. But sometimes you can feel quite isolated and think you're the only one. So reaching out and networking is a really positive step. And this leads me on to my next point of support and mentoring. I think having a mentor at any age and any sort of stage in your career is absolutely key. It may never be the same mentor every time. You may have more than one. But I've always had one, whether it just happens or by proxy because of who you're working with, or I've actually gone out in search for one. I've employed a careers coach before, so even though I am a careers coach myself, I can't always coach myself into what I want to do. I had a big change last year. I decided to leave my employer and set up my own business, but I had really no idea what was next after that. But having a career coach helped me talk through, well, why are you doing these things? Why are you making these decisions? And then again, referencing who's best to connect with or what resources to go and use to get onto the ladder and start doing those next steps. So getting some support and mentoring is really useful. Anybody who's been to university, whether you've recently graduated, you're about to graduate, or you graduated 20 years ago, you have a whole network of alumni. So you are an alum yourself, but you can reach out to your own networks, whether it's through a group on social media or those regular emails you might get from them. I know normally they'll be emailing asking you for donations, but there's no harm in connecting with them, saying, I'd like to speak to somebody who is in this sector, who also studied at my university. It's a great place to start. And my next point is to hustle. Now, not everything in terms of jobs is going to be advertised. The job that I currently do now was not advertised. I was networking and chatting to people, and I knew somebody, but I didn't know they had anything in mind, and I hadn't really said I was looking for a job. But they sent me a text message and was like, what are you up to? Do you want to do something? I've got some work for you if you want it. I wasn't going to say no. I did want to know what the work was first, and luckily it was something I could do. But go out, seek opportunities. If you're at the early stages of your career or you're looking for a career change, so doing something different, there is no harm in contacting a company or an individual and saying, I'm really interested in getting into this organisation or into this industry sector or doing this role. Can I get some work experience? And that can be at any level. I've got a colleague of mine who is looking to change direction. They've worked in the private sector, they've worked in higher education, looking for complete career direction change. And again, I've just said, go out and hustle, exactly the same as I would tell a university student or apprentice. So sometimes you can create your own pathways. And also anyone who's got some ideas, whether you're problem solving. So you think, oh, this thing doesn't work, I could make it better. Well, can you actually make that a commercial entity? Could you do something with that rather than just having ideas? Think about the things that you're already doing and how that could help. So my seventh point is obviously on the compete side. So you've made some decisions about what direction you want to go in. You've had a plan around how you're going to do that, whether it's mentoring, hustling, or maybe the more obvious routes of going down the job boards and things. But make sure you are ready when it's time to apply. So get that CV up to date. Make sure that you always get these things checked as well. I cannot stress enough how important it is to have a really good CV. One thing I would say, unless you're looking to go into academia, is regardless of how many years experience you've got, you shouldn't really be going any longer than 2 pages on a CV. Now, I know that might be a bit shock horror for some people, but all we want is a tailored CV. So it doesn't need to be all your years of experience. It needs to be the relevant experience that has that detail that's tailored to the opportunity you're applying for. And the rest can be much briefer, because whilst we want to know you've done lots of work, some of the skill sets may not be as necessary or required as the more important stuff we want to show off for you. And this is exactly the same for a covering letter. There are lots of easy failures in covering letters, which are really easily avoided. So, make sure you say why you want to work for that company. What is it that's made you want to apply for them? Not the sector, but them in particular. You can't copy and paste these things the same as an application form. And also, tell them why you should be the person doing that job. Quite often I hear a lot of people writing, I want to do this job because you will give me X as an employee. But if they're giving you lots of stuff, you're not telling them all the things you can give them. And that's what they want. They need someone to fulfill a role. So do make sure you consider that. And that kind of leads on to what's your pitch. So why me? Why pick me? Why take me on instead of somebody else? Really think about how you pitch yourself for that role in that organisation. It's really easy to find information about companies nowadays with the joys of Google. Look at their company values. Look at maybe if they're in renewables or sustainability, or they've got really strong ethics, policies. Does that align with how you live and breathe your life or things that you're interested in? So always think about how you're going to pitch yourself. And again, as I say, similar to the application form, covering letters, is don't copy and paste answers. When they ask you certain questions, it's very easy to go, I've got an answer for that, I'll copy and paste that across. But it might not actually be the best example for that company or that role, when it might have been for a previous one. So do bear in mind that as much as it's easy to copy and paste elements of all of these things, it should always have a tailored angle to it, so the employer knows that you really want to work for them. My next point, number 8, is feedback. Always ask for feedback, whether that's getting feedback on an application form before you submit, having a practice interview, whether you're at university with your career service, or if you're already working with friends and family, or reaching out to somebody. It might be a teacher that you know, but make sure that you get some practice and some feedback. If you do not get the job at first, fine, but ask why. What was it? So you might have got to the final stages, you might have got to an interview and not made it. What was it that they decided, actually, no, we're not going to appoint you? It's absolutely fine to ask for feedback. And if they're a good recruiter, they'll give you good feedback. They won't just say, oh, somebody picked you at the post, but you were really good, because that's not going to help you. So I'd always probe on that for feedback. If it's at the early stages of an application, so a CV submission, it's unlikely you will get really good feedback, because it's at the very, very early stages, and they may have had 1,000 applications. So they're not going to have the time or capacity to get back to everybody about why. They will have done a very quick sift to get through the ones that have got the keywords jumping out that they're shortlisting. So it's unlikely, but if you get towards the final stages, by all means reach out and ask for feedback. And as I just mentioned in my discussion around interviews, practice everything. Get your covering letter sort of skill, just home it in. Like, there's so many resources online for you to get good sort of models as to how to structure a covering letter, but draft it, redraft it, reread it. With an application form, I would highly recommend you do not complete the whole thing in one go. It's quite tiring, and if you're doing it properly, it could take up to 2 hours. So I would always say, do a little bit, save it, and come back. It may be you come back the next day rather than doing it across one full day. but also try and put that stuff on a Word doc so you don't lose it just in case. But yeah, practice everything, particularly now with video interviews. I'm sure some of you may have already been through this. You may do it on Zoom, so it's live, or they may be using products like Sonru or HireView, which are pre-recorded. So you're just talking to a webcam. There's nobody there to ask the question or to even give you any sort of positive signals that you're doing things right. They're one of the harder ones to do because you are just talking on your own to yourself. There isn't anybody there. So I would definitely recommend getting some practice. If you are invited to a pre-recorded video interview, most of the platforms that they use, the video interviewing software, give you practice questions to try as part of your setup. Do not skip that section. Practice, practice, practice. You need to get used to pressing start and stop. You need to get used to what a minute feels like when you've got a minute to read a question and make some notes. Getting used to what a minute and a half, 2 minutes feels like when you're talking. You can surprisingly fill an awful lot of an answer in 2 minutes, but people tend to get a bit carried away with it. So get some practice in as best as you can. And my final point is to say keep going. We've all had huge peaks and troughs in the last 12 months, never mind previous. And, everyone has shown some real determination, resilience and strength, not just in their personal life, but adapting to how we work and how we learn, how we teach. Everything is now down a webcam. It's very rare that we're able to hang out with our colleagues, or have those interactions that we would normally have that would boost our emotional intelligence. It has been very isolating, but I think you need to almost take a moment to congratulate yourselves on how far you've come in the last 12 months. I appreciate it can be frustrating if you've been furloughed, but you're getting through it. It may not feel like it every single day. You maybe have some really down days where you think, will this ever end? But you've come so far that I think just to keep fighting for it, keep going, having that determination to whether change your life around or just go for that next job. You can definitely, you've definitely demonstrated resilience, strength and determination. So I would definitely sort of hold on to that. And my final thing to say is you've got this. Whatever you want to do moving forward, you can do it. Just follow those simple steps. Get a mentor, get some feedback, get some practice and keep going. I cannot stress enough how important it is to have a network of people around you when you're doing this sort of activity. It really helps give you different perspectives, different feedback, so that when you do enter into applying for a job, that you've done as best as you possibly can. So I'm going to pause there and ask if you have any questions.
Okay. Thanks very much, Rachel. That's really interesting. I'm writing down tips for myself here. I've got one for you while we wait to see if anybody else comes up with any. You talked about feedback.
Yes.
But let's be honest, not all employers do give you feedback. A lot of them say we won't. If you don't hear from us, no thanks. What else can you do? Where else can you go to get some feedback on your applications and your interview skills? You talked about having a network of people.
Absolutely. My first thing would be just to revisit that job description and really be honest with yourself. Did I answer those questions concisely? And, did I answer the question for a start? A lot of people get carried away and they answer something that they think is the answer, but actually it isn't. It's just what your comfort zone is. So I guess that's where I go back to saying get some practice. I know it's really awkward, but watch yourself back. Put yourself in front of that employer as if you're the employer. I used to do this with my students all the time. I'd make them watch some stuff back and they'd cringe, they'd hate it, but they learned so much because, once they do open at least one eye to look at it or hear it, I'm like, did you answer that question? Did you do that? If it comes to particular elements of the application that might be a bit sticky, so answering competency-based questions, for example, whether that's verbal on interview or written in an application form, is an easy method to sort of follow and it's easy for employers to then recognise that you can answer the question and you've done it properly, is using the STAR method. I'm sure quite a lot of you on this call already know what this is, but for those that aren't sure, basically it stands for situation, task, action, and result. I quite often put an L or an extra R on the end of that of lessons learned and reflection. So consider explaining what your situation was. If they give you so they might give you, say, describe a time when you've had to work as part of a team to solve a complex problem in a tight time frame. Like, there's quite a few things to unpack there, but you have to try and think of the best situation. So explain what that situation actually was, what your particular task was in that situation. I don't want to hear about everybody else's tasks. I want to know what you were doing. And this is where it gets sort of kind of picky, is if you don't nail the task and the action bit about what you did, I can't process that application in a sense of, well, I don't know what you did in that yourself, so I don't know if you're capable of doing that in my scenario, in my workplace. So be really specific about, I did this, my task was, and what the result was. The result isn't always going to be positive either. You're not always going to actually have solved that problem or done it to time. And that's where the extra lessons learned and reflection comes in, is saying what you would do differently next time.
I'm struggling to decide between two very different job paths. Would you recommend doing work experience before making the final decision?
Yeah, absolutely. And talk to people that are already doing those jobs. It's very easy to find those people on LinkedIn or Google, and just say, hey, I'm really interested in how you got there, what you do, what the reality of it is, because I'm thinking of leaning that way myself. As long as you make good connections with people and you ask politely, it's very rare people are going to turn around and say no. They love a bit of self-flattery and they love to be complimented. So ask. It may just be that you just need to have a quick conversation with someone. It may not be that you need to go and get the work experience. But obviously work experience is really useful, because if you do then make a decision on which pathway and you've got work experience there, then you can put that on your CV and demonstrate that you've already started sort of moving forward with that.
Okay, that's great. We've got another one here. Have you got any recommendations for online covering letter structure?
Yeah, so I would say that regardless whether it's online or, well, everything's online nowadays, it's very rare you stick something in the post, but you still have to format your covering letter like a proper letter. So your address, their address, the date, the reference, so the job title. First para should be your introduction as to who you are, why you're applying, well, who you are, what you're applying for, and where you found the job advertised. People always want to know where you found that, because it may be that you've had a conversation with somebody at an event or a conference. Name drop them. I'm applying for this role as discussed at X conference with your colleague, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And then the next paragraphs need to cover, why are you applying for this particular role? So why that employer, and then why that role? So what interests you in it? And then the final paragraph or two, but no more, so try and keep it to one page, is why you should be the chosen one. So your pitch, as I was saying before, what's your sales pitch to them? Demonstrate with evidence that you have got some of the skill sets that they're looking for in that post, and then make reference to your CV that should be attached as a separate document, and then sign off.
That sounds really comprehensive. I was scribbling all that down then. I've got a couple here that are kind of related, so I might bunch them together. One of them, how important is age as a contributing factor? I presume that means in how you approach your job search and the results of your job search, I guess. And the other one is from Ricardo, what do you do when the feedback you get is that you are overqualified? He makes the point that sometimes the hiring managers seem to have less experience and fewer qualifications, and you get rejected.
Yeah, well, I'll give you my sort of first-hand experience with this, Ricardo. First of all, the person who asked about the age is a protected characteristic. You can never be discriminated against it. And if you can, I don't know why you'd want to work for them in the first place, because you're a protected characteristic. So age should not be an issue. We see it less and less nowadays, to be honest. Markets have changed. Recruiters are better. It's only if for example, you need to be of a certain age if you're, I don't know, if you're under 18 and you're serving alcohol, you can't, certain things like that. But age is a protected characteristic, so that should not come in to it. Although I appreciate if you're coming towards sort of a more retirement age. I mean, who knows what that is anymore in reality? I know I'm going to have to work a lot longer than I thought I would. It really shouldn't be a factor. So I wouldn't let that stop you from applying to something, because it's almost as if you're potentially putting that barrier up yourself. And as I say, if an employer is discriminating against you based on your age, I mean, they shouldn't actually be asking for your date of birth, but if they do on an equal ops form and they use it, you have got grounds to question and I wouldn't say put a grievance in, but definitely point out to them that you are a protected characteristic. So the overqualified side of things, Ricardo, I was applying for a post just when I quit my last job because I thought, it'll just be something to sort of tie me over. But I knew that I was overqualified. I knew it was going to be a pay drop, but it was an interim thing. And I thought some money's better than no money. And I had this conversation with them and I said, look, I appreciate I'm overqualified. I appreciate it's £12,000 a year less than what I'm earning right now. But I really want to do this job. Like, I really want to do it. And explain the reasons why. I was also very open about some of the skill sets that I had missing that I would gain from doing that job. So you may be overqualified in a sense that you might have had a more senior position, but it doesn't mean you've necessarily still got all the skill sets required for that job. So just be open and honest with them. And again, going back to what I said about the age one, if someone's rejecting you that quickly, do you really want to work for a company like that? Now, question those values.
It's a very good point. Very good point. I've got somebody who's asking about what the job market's like for automotive engineers, which I suspect may be a little bit out of your remit. There is a skills shortage for engineers in the UK at the moment.
I do know a bit about it, only because my friends work in it, and I was a founding member of Gradcracker, so I have worked in STEM for quite a while.
Yeah.
Production lines are moving out of the UK because for cost save. I mean, they always have done, and then they bring them back and they do the whole best of British. Brexit's having a massive issue. We've got export control issues, imports, levies, all sorts of stuff. But just think about what element of automotive do you want to go into. Marketing is really vibrant at the moment because as much as they're not maybe producing as many cars, the demand is now there because people have saved so much money. They now want to buy a luxury car and spend their money elsewhere. So they're kind of fighting for that thing. I mean, I just saw Bentley Motors today, who are based up in the northwest. They've just rolled off their 200,000th car. People are still busy doing stuff. It's just they won't necessarily be producing that many if the demand isn't there. And obviously with some of the technologies that people are testing, they may just be putting things on hold because of cost implications. But if you've got a particular company you're interested in working for, just reach out to them. You can even just sign up for job alerts and things as well. So if there's nothing right now, it doesn't mean there won't be something in the future.
So I've got another query here saying, do you have any useful website links where you can go to do online courses? I presume that might be more on the soft skills side. Do you mean, Kerry? If you could perhaps elaborate what kind of courses you mean. But is there a general resource that you could recommend, Rachel?
Yeah, there's quite a few. I mean, the main one I tend to go to is LinkedIn Learning. It's free. You don't have to be a premium member. Oh, by the way, don't get a premium membership at LinkedIn. You really don't need it. They always try and entice you, but don't. I put a post up today. I'm not premium, and I've had over 10,000 views on it. You don't need it. But LinkedIn Learning is really good. You can literally type anything in, and there's a course, and there's more than one. I'd also have a look at the likes of FutureLearn and Coursera. So I'm actually on doing a course on FutureLearn at the minute around fashion and sustainability. It's free. It's 6 weeks. It's 3 hours a week work. If you want, you can buy a certificate at the end of it so you can prove you've done it, but sometimes you don't need to. But if you're looking to do something with interior design, I'd definitely look at doing, they're called MOOCs, Massive Open Online Courses. And then normally, most of them are written and delivered by employers and universities as partnerships. So you get the best of both worlds. Loads of them are award winning as well. I know quite a few colleagues from the University of Manchester. They won quite a few awards for their chemistry based ones, but they literally can be anything for your sort of, you know, teenage child all the way through to I just want to learn about philosophy because I'm interested. You can literally do anything, type any course in. But as I say, FutureLearn and Coursera are the massive open online course platforms I'd recommend. So they're called MOOCs. But for more short stuff, or just something maybe a bit more corporate, I'd also look at LinkedIn Learning.
Okay. Carrie has actually come back with a bit more detail, but I think you answered her question anyway, because that's a very generalist website. She's looking for something in interior design, so I think that will be up there.
I think also, Carrie, I'm not sure if you already have a portfolio yet, or if you would tend to take a physical portfolio to an interview, but I would highly recommend building your own personal branded portfolio using Wix, W-I-X. It's free. There's loads of templates. I actually saw a blog about interior design portfolio building on it today because I'm teaching it with my students tomorrow morning. But yeah, create your own personal branded portfolio. Throw your CV on there, your work experience, your mood boards, all that kind of stuff. Because it's a really good link to send to somebody, but also to have it linked out from your LinkedIn profile so people can go and view it in their own time.
Right. It's really, really interesting. So I suppose all this is coming across is that you really need to put the work in.
So nothing comes easy. You have to graft.
Yeah. How do you keep up the momentum if you've had a few rejections, etc.? What's the key to that? To keep going, keep trying.
So I tend not to dwell. Once I've had my feedback, I'm like, it's out of my control. Move on. Like, forget it. I use the feedback and take it with me, but I don't dwell on, oh gosh, if only I'd got that job, because it's actually really unproductive for you. Again, going back to when I said about having support and mentoring, friends, family, colleagues, anybody, if you're talking to people about what you're doing, they will help carry that kind of burden if you don't get what you want first time. We say a problem shared is a problem halved, and it's true. So definitely do that, but just really try not to dwell, because you're just using all that wonderful energy that you could plow into something more positive in a negative way, and it's not going to help. So it definitely is a mind over matter, but I appreciate it's easier said than done for some people because they maybe learn and work differently. I'm very much a pragmatist. So I just kind of get on, take risks and see what happens. But if you lean more towards the reflector and the theorist, it may take you a bit longer to digest that way of thinking.
I guess so. We've got a specific one in here from Navnet saying, is LinkedIn membership important? If you're not a member, does that go against you? You're not on LinkedIn.
I mean, it doesn't go against you because you still have all your experience. It's just that you're not. It's one of the biggest platforms in the world to get your name out there, and I don't know why you wouldn't be on it. I guess that's the flip side, is why wouldn't you be on it?
It's hitting everybody, I think, at the moment. I think everybody's thinking about their future and where their career might be going. I think there's one person who's, for example, has just left the armed forces and is changing career, switching career.
Yeah.
What if you're switching career and you have experience, but it's perhaps not what is being asked for in the job that you'd like to go into?
Yeah. So in terms of the armed forces, well, thank you for a start for doing that. Massive commitment there. Engineering companies love people from the armed forces. Like, I used to work in the oil and gas sector. I was in Aberdeen every month for a week, and they were like, they're amazing. Like, they're the best people we recruit. So that's one top tips. Maybe look at oil and gas because they love people from the armed forces. If you want to do a change of direction, start talking to people in that area you want to get into. Put the feelers out. Ask the questions. How do I get into it? How did you get into it? What would you recommend? Do you think I'm at a level now where I can go into it, or do I need to do a bit more work before I do? Whether that's doing a MOOC, a LinkedIn learning course, or maybe something more formal. You might need to retrain in certain areas that do need an official qualification. But figure this stuff out by asking people. There is no point in sitting in silence and not asking, because you will only do harm to yourself. So always reach out and find people. It's almost like being a bit of a detective, I guess, but it's very easy to find things nowadays online. I mean, you can start typing half of your question out and Google will finish the question for you. They know what you want. So, yeah, definitely reach out to people already in that sector.
Thanks very much, everyone. I'm going to end this session now. It's very, very good to see so many people keen on progressing their careers and taking the opportunity to speak to an expert.